Hello, digital warriors, and welcome back to the Forge of Unicorn podcast. Today, we have a very interesting guest with us, Sean Smith. Sean is the founder and managing partner at Search Funds Venture, a company that does investment with a different flavor. But I want Sean to introduce himself and his company because I don't want to talk about this very intriguing business model. Sean, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thanks so much, Michaela.
So, buddy, I am really excited today because what you do as an investor is not common. It's very niche, let me say. And I would love you to present the idea that you have created your fund with your partner. And today we put in the discussion some real life example because talking with you, I guess that this will bring a lot of sense about how people are misusing technology and how instead technology used in the proper way, like you do it, especially discussing about the framework that you have designed to do it properly, can bring a company to growth that is sustainable and with a lot of happiness for everybody, investor, CEO of the company, and the people that are working there. What do you think? Shall we go through this route?
Sounds great. Happy to jump in.
The floor is yours.
Excellent. Well, thanks so much for having me. And like you said, we're a pretty niche investor. There's a whole world of small business acquisitions that's getting more and more popular, and we're at the forefront of it in many ways. And our approach hinges on, a fundamental value investing strategy where we back individuals and partnerships that are acquiring small businesses. And in most cases, these small businesses are not software companies. They're not tech enabled by any means. They're your local plumbers, they're your local HVAC companies, contract manufacturers, very much what people call old economy businesses, right? So we invest in people who are acquiring those. What we do is we aim to create value in a handful of ways. There's more traditional playbooks like inorganic growth and M&A, instituting proper governance and systems, shared services, all that. But I think, for the purpose of what we're talking about today, and Michele, what you and I have talked about, we also focus heavily on tech enablement. And we really look for opportunities to implement software that may already exist. If there's a need to create more types of software solutions, generally it's going to be sort of a no-code strategy, nothing too robust, right? But implementing that so that there's real efficiencies and real value created from a software strategy, that's key. And then to bring it all home, to your point, it's critical to have the right people, the right incentives in place, and that there's a culture around utilizing and maximizing the benefit of any tech enablement we do. So that's kind of I would say, end-to-end approach, right? It's very much a fundamental strategy, value investing strategy, underpinned by this value creation, which we have playbooks around.
And I love the fact that you highlighted immediately the aspect of culture because culture is the toxin that in a lot of organization we see spreading around and people they are even not realizing that they are doing it because culture is intangible. It's something the leadership believes that they are mastering with their behaviors. What they are not able to understand is that whatever behavior they are showing is mirroring the culture of the company. And so culture is something absolutely that we will discuss today in this episode with you. Related to tech enablement, in this era of AI, how much AI it will be enabled in your investment? Because you were talking about companies that are absolutely not technological enhanced, and now we are helping them through your fund to become better, to scale, to use technology in the proper way. Are you massively using AI or still a skeptic or a big fan because it provides a lot of benefit? Which is your takeaway so far on AI enablement?
Yeah. So, the first things first, right? When we look at opportunities for tech enablement, call it we typically partner with or coach the buyer of the business to really go through a process flow mapping process, right? So, go from end to end. How does a product or a service go from order through delivery through collection? How does a dollar flow through the business? All those important exercises to really get a sense for what are all the various tasks and activities and handoffs that come into play. And what we found in many cases, almost across the board, is the businesses we're investing in typically don't even have kind of the data infrastructure in place to implement a more robust AI, let alone software kind of connectivity or workflow automations or what have you. So we start with kind of the the kind of laying the infrastructure and the foundation, making sure there's, depending on the business model, a good ERP, MRP, there's good CRM, there's the right kind of scheduling software, if there's a need for routing software, and that all that stuff is getting collected somewhere, all that data, so that there is kind of a foundation to be created, and then of course you can do more robust things. So I think it's important to think first about kind of the infrastructure. To your point, a lot of these businesses don't even have that, and even going through accounting systems, there's value to be created in these businesses simply by implementing better accounting systems, which is a mix of people and software as well. So once you have all that in place, a lot of the kind of playbooks and areas we focus on, and frankly, in some cases, we really kind of handhold or do some of this stuff on behalf of our portfolio companies and show them how to do it. But we focus a lot on, I would say, sales and marketing automation. Depending on the business model, it may lean more towards sales. If it's more of kind of a customized, less commoditized product or service. So we'll really support in putting together the right kind of tools to prospect very effectively, to engage in sales and marketing automation, and again to tie that back to other data systems, typically a CRM, right? There's ways to use AI in that, and I think that it can be very effective. But again, it first comes down to getting the kind of first principles correct, and getting people to actually use those software tools, right?
Hmm. And here is intriguing because what you just said to me looks, and correct me if I am wrong, that the first step is to work on operational efficiency. So to being able to have a value stream map that shows them all the waste in their operational process, the cash flow, and especially, it seems, in their intake of new customers, so generating leads and managing it. Am I wrong, or I'm close to what you just said?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. It comes down to identifying those key value drivers and using the best tool to accomplish them, not kind of overdoing it.
Amazing. And this brings me to the second point, that when you start to have operational efficiencies based on a value stream map, you start to have data. And data are power. A lot of people using, let me correct myself, roll back, misusing AI is doing AI integration in a company that have general data. And so AI will produce, with the heuristic typical of AI, replies with the usual margin error of X%, enhanced with the poor data quality of the data that they are injecting into the AI. So with your model, indeed, having data that are congruent with what you want to improve will for sure create a solid foundation of integrating technology and AI in the loop. And I love it. But then you say something that was really intriguing me. And then these people, they have to use it. And this is the aspect of cultural resistance and emotional trauma, because I did my job until yesterday in this way. Then the investor came in, and after a while they came with some new fancy technology. I feel that I don't know how to use it. I start to be afraid, so I go in reptilian mode because I fear that they will lay off me of the company because I am not able to work as they are looking to change the way of working in this company. Is this a pattern that I am imagining, or is something that you are observing? Because these are the observations that I see on the field in the last 20 years of data collected in digital transformation.
Yeah, and whether the reason is fear of being laid off or being replaced by software, or just frankly fear and discomfort related to change. I couldn't tell you the exact kind of emotional reason, but certainly we see a trend towards negative responses to anything that is very abrupt, right? So if there's sort of a, you know, within the first week after the business changes hands and the investors are involved, if there's any kind of implication of, okay, we're ripping out the old way of doing things and implementing this new ERP system, so everyone's got to learn how to use it and everyone's got to get up to speed with the way that we're doing things, even if it isn't software, frankly, just any big change like that can be pretty, can elicit a pretty, I would say, difficult response from folks. So it's very important to kind of ease into it, to restructure things gradually and not, disrupt.
Disruption is indeed the word that better describe what are the emotion connected to what we just described. So, to put some details in the picture, when people they start to perceive that their competence level is not anymore up to the game of a traditional HR system, they start to fear that they go under a process improvement, performance process improvement. Sorry, and for this they are naturally scared. Okay, if the process will show that I need to improve, will I be able to do that? And a lot of people that are stuck in a traditional business without training for a long time, they start to have a normalized way of working, a routine, let's call, that putting them in a training, letting them know that in a while they need to change, even with the assistance of somebody like a coach, a trainer, a tutor that will help them, scares them because it moves them out of their comfort zone. So all these kind of feelings are there. And at the end, we work for a salary. Not everybody works because they have the ability to connect their passion with their skills and the way of working that they are doing to bring money at home. And we have family obligation, all of us. So if you have a life that is not aligned to what you are as a person, and what you do as a job, and what you need to provide your house with the family needs in order to sustain them, then starts to create a trigger, an emotional trigger inside to start to reverb your way of working against what my new CEO is trying to move the company. And this dissonance is creating what typically is called disengagement and burnout. That I believe in small business can be really tangible, a lot more than in a corporation, right?
Absolutely. I mean, in a small business, the team is any one person can have so much impact on the business, right? So it's just critical to make sure that everyone's marching in the same direction, that people are using operating systems to maintain culture and to ultimately, drive behaviors in the right way that people would like.
And behavior and driving behavior in the right way is something that I love because this is exactly what a behavioral engineer does. So looking, and this is beautiful, you see how you started, you look at a MVP and you see something that is working in an organization, so they have a product that they start to sell. And so this brings to all the concept that we were discussing about the operational efficiency. Then they finally have a cash flow with customer support, product design, development. And if something is not working in an efficient way, you need to cross correct the organization. And you do this with behavioral engineers that are going into the picture, cataloging which are the dysfunction into the process, which are the dysfunction related to how we behave, and then starting to cross correct this in a empathic, non-violent communication way, because then the people start to embrace the new way of working from inside, known as a gentle push from outside. This is something absolutely that I love of the job that we do. Is something similar also in the blueprint that you have when you do this technological transformation with your portfolios company, or did you find this as an heuristic after years of applying your framework?
Yeah, I'd say in general, what we've seen so far is applying sort of the proper frameworks for incentives and the kind of gradual training and implementation, and really kind of bringing, understanding the goals and the needs of folks at the organization, and ideally supporting them in accomplishing their goals while driving the value that we've put together in our value creation plan, is generally a really strong way to align behaviors, right? So as you've noted, a lot of folks are depending on kind of the role in an organization, salary is paramount, right? And just ensuring that things aren't going to change on that front, right? That's kind of, you can rely on that, but potentially instituting more of a commission plan or any type of bonus that's related to the new ways of driving behavior, ideally, that can be effective for folks that have an ambition to kind of earn more. um, that could be also in the form of an equity grant. There's plenty of ways to have economic ties to that. On the flip side, there's also ways to, create incentives that allow people to spend, or create structures that allow people to spend more time with family, or allow people to accomplish other goals, right? So it doesn't all need to be, um, I would say, economic in order to drive the right behaviors around, the value creation plan.
Yeah, I totally believe in the concept of well-being. That doesn't. I don't want that this is perceived as EP stuff, but it's a concept that is widespread now, finally, in the neuroscience and behavioral science, because the well-being is a balance between the private life, the spiritual and philosophical thinking, and the work life. And at the end, we spend a lot of time in a company. And if a company has a toxic environment, when we go back home to our families, this toxic environment, this toxicity is continuously tripping toxicity in your mind. And this is where the well-being start to fall apart. I remember when I was a kid to start the discussion, putting examples as we saw at the beginning of this podcast. My mother was getting a performance improvement plan from her boss, because the boss told her, Miss, we hire you to work and solve problems, not to bring your family problem in the company. This was a pretty harsh and disrespectful behavior. It was, okay, 50 years ago, or mine. Yeah, roughly 45 probably. And that was, I don't want to say common, because then I will say that this was a normality and this instead a blasphemy that doesn't have to repeat ever in the future, but was a harsh behavior that now we won't accept anymore, luckily. But this was absolutely mining the well-being of a person working in a company. Now, I strongly believe that a company should be human-centric, and the well-being has to be a balance between what we need to do to being a balanced and healthy human being that is productive on the work. And so, if we don't align well-being, purpose, and ability and talent with what the company does to survive and provide us the wage, and all this stuff are connected together, we don't have a real well-being. We have an equation that is not balanced, and sooner or later we start to crack to a point that one or the other party will say goodbye. It's something that is working as well in your field with your framework that you are applying?
Yeah, I think to your point, one of the biggest disruptors can be a toxic culture and poor well-being. And to use examples, we have had portfolio companies where we've seen, a individual that may have created more of a toxic culture, or potentially groups that, if they were allowed to kind of continue the, ways they were operating, the culture could have gone into more of a spiral. Generally, we're able to kind of identify that. And I think, we put such an emphasis on backing great buyers, very experienced leaders. So those folks are pretty good at identifying and navigating through those challenges as well. But it's critical to keep the culture very positive, to eliminate any toxicity before it spreads, and certainly that trickles into other aspects of the value creation plan. If you think about tech enablement, we had talked about kind of an ERP implementation in one of our portfolio companies. And, there was sort of a resistance from a cohort, but, by kind of alleviating some of the pressure from that specific cohort, others in the organization who were, felt less negative about that approach, saw that from the top down, from the leadership down, it was not rewarded to have kind of a negative feedback towards that ERP implementation, right? It was more of a, the one folks that were kind of had a more positive culture and a more positive growth mindset towards it were rewarded more so.
Yes. And this is a beautiful aspect that you are touching, because a lot of leaders, they still believe in the stick and carrot. And I'm not a fan of the stick and carrot. Not that I don't love the carrots because I'm vegan, but I don't like the stick, because the stick is bringing in the company fear of failure, fear of getting punished in somehow ways. And at the end is limiting my attitude to innovate, because if my innovation is creating benefit, okay, maybe something will drop from the sky and I will get a reward. But if instead I'm creating an issue, will the company accept the issue, do a post-mortem analysis to understand how to prevent it and which was the lesson learned we got from this event? Or will I get the stick on my back and maybe also a kick in my butt to get laid off of the company? And if this happen, then the culture start to compromise immediately to a point that goodbye growth, we will stay in the mediocrity because I don't want to risk anymore to get the stick on my fingers.
Yeah, I'd say we're generally more in favor of positive reinforcement than ruling by Machiavellian law.
Yeah. And isn't funny that at the end, after years of command and control, leadership has understood that people behave like dogs. If you treat them with a cookie, they will respond better than with a kick.
Bring some Pavlov into it as well.
Yeah. And this, to me, is sad and dramatic that people, after probably 50 years of leadership evolution, somebody understood that rewarding, like training a dog, is more effective on human beings as well. That is really, really sad to me, because if people were still thinking that rewarding with the stick was more effective than rewarding with the cookie, it means that probably somebody has still the DNA of the slavery in their brain, and this should be removed from the human kind. But yeah, the point that I'm touching this, Sean, is because I'm curious on one aspect. What we observe is that a lot of leaders, they are not able to understand the connection between their authority and the innocent behaviors that they have. So, in the kind of business that you are running, I believe you see immediately leaders and people on the field, and you have a perception of much toxic could be the behavior of a worker versus the same behavior from a leader. I saw it in corporations where big leaders were doing something that was totally normal. And because it became totally normal, it became the norm de facto that also everybody on the firm were doing. But then the same leader was behaving in this functional way, start to punish who was behaving as well in that way. That was pretty crazy and intriguing to observe as a development in HR policies. In the kind of field that you are working, I believe there is a lot more transparency and immediateness on perceiving these aspects. Are you able to correlate this law of authority and dysfunctional behavior in a way that, yeah, if a leader does something, the result is for sure this dysfunctionalities?
It's hard to give, an absolute kind of answer on that. I think, there's certainly leaders that kind of lead by example are, you know, I think in common literature agreed to be much stronger than kind of taking the approach of do as I say, not as I do. For us, it's really important that folks lead with empathy and understand kind of the team and kind of the organization they're coming into, and not come in with a as you said earlier, just uh, an agenda that they will steamroll anyone to accomplish, because at the end of the day that's not how you kind of create a team that supports everyone and that really drives towards a common goal. So for us it's much more about that kind of leading with empathy and understanding how to kind of have that EQ to support the team.
And I love that you use EQ and empathy in the description, because this to me provides us the perfect bridge to start to go into examples. I would like to go through some examples of transformation that you have done following your blueprint, so that people start to realize on a smaller scale than a gigantic corporation how a healthy transformation looks like. Because what I understood is that a lot of leaders out there, they don't know what a real digital transformation that works look like. And this is to me very sad, because a lot of money is spent every year to embark on digital transformation that has a success ratio of 7%. Last year was 2.5 trillions. And the forecast for this year and the next one, due to the high digital transformation and disruption, is from 3 to 4 trillion dollars wasted worldwide in a failure digital transformation. So going on a smaller scale where we can understand the virtues of a digital transformation done properly. Which use case is a good one to start this discussion?
Well, I'd say just in general, our hold period or kind of the maturity of our portfolio is still very young. That being said, we've done, very, I would say, specific or kind of, I would say, transforming specific functions or implementing specific software, AI tools, or creating that infrastructure, like I said earlier. But it's certainly too early to kind of give a holistic end-to-end example, I would say, in a lot of these portfolio companies. But I'd say, a good early win is one of our portfolio companies is, it's a trade contract company that serves facilities and does kind of maintenance for large apartment complexes, industrial facilities, schools, all that good stuff. So, they had lots of customer information in a CRM, and we were able to kind of, support them in a few ways. One was more kind of involved, and we kind of got in the weeds with them and helped them enrich a lot of that company information, the contact information, set up kind of sales software infrastructure out that, and even use some of the tools that we use, within our fund to supplement prospecting and find, similar potential leads and qualify those leads and set up kind of automation cadences around doing that. So I'd say, that's one example where we took an asset that a company had, which was purely a list of customers, right, or potential customers, and we were able to enrich that using software and modest AI, right, but really just kind of software tools related to data and sales enablement. Um, Take that a step further, right, with the data infrastructure. We're in the process of implementing sort of a new ERP there, and that will make things a lot more effective in not only connectivity with the CRM and the enriched data and kind of the sales piece, but it also is going to improve scheduling and routing, and it's going to drive a lot of value to the company in being able to kind of meet these facility maintenance needs, and service customers a lot more effectively. So kind of that's kind of two pieces there, right? Sales automation, um, bringing in some of the efficiencies driven by a better ERP scheduling system and routing system, and then the last piece, right, to close the loop, we've spoken with advisors, we've kind of collected information from other portfolio companies, even introduced these folks to other CEOs within our portfolio to really get a sense for how do we set up the right incentive programs, how do we kind of shift behavior towards using this CRM and using these sales enablement tools and using the ERP. And part of that requires new hires in the sales space, but part of it also relates to what I touched on earlier, which is supplementing, salaries with commission plans or bonus plans or equity grants that really align folks towards a longer term goal in addition to that nearer term goal, of the first and the 15th, right? So I think that's a good holistic example of not only how we have gotten in and supported with certain tech enablement, and utilization of software that we identified alongside the leadership team, but it kind of demonstrates how closing the loop with good incentive plans and kind of the right culture and team is underway, but moving nicely.
I love, man, what you just present because creates me the perfect canvas where we can paint now a lot of stuff. You talk a lot about an holistic view, not a targeted digital transformation. You talk a lot around a holistic return of investment, not that I, as the CEO of the company, I get a lot of money in my pocket and I get a new Lambo. Is a different kind of approach what you're talking about compared to what is in the IT industry. Also, what was really screaming in my ears was we intake people with the right knowledge and skills from the market, like a sales expert. A luxury that a lot of companies in the IT field that they cannot do because they are so costly and so rare that you cannot hire them. So you need to farm them on site. So let's start to unpack all this gigantic pile of items, dysfunction, let's call dysfunction in this way for the moment, of a canonical digital transformation in the IT field, where, first of all, it's not holistic. They smash a target, and this is the target of the digital transformation. Let's get some zombies out of the closet. Agile. How many digital agile transformation failed because the CEO said through the board, we need agile because it's trendy, because everybody does it, everybody has improved the return of investment, and the board requires it. And then they implement agile. They spend a lot of money, return of investment, zero. All the people involved in the process, consultant, people that were providing training, people that were providing certification, they got a lot of money. The employees, nothing. Where is the holistic part in the IT?
Yeah, that's tough, right? I mean, it's kind of the old saying that in certain cases the only winners in those types of projects are the consultants, the lawyers, the service providers, right? So you want to make sure that there's a really strong lead in those types of projects that's thinking about the other stakeholders, whether that's, the team members, employees, whether it's the, investors, or whoever else, customers, suppliers, all that good stuff.
And now, to let you understand the level of craziness that we have in IT, without the leaders, they are able to realize it because they are so swamped into the problems that they are not even able to breathe out of the barrel of their problem. We were looking at the Scrum certification. They ramp up since the Scrum certification became something purchasable. Last year, we have a divergence between Scrum Master and developer that are certified as Scrum developers of 10 pair. And 10x on this kind of stuff could be a good ratio. If you have 10 developers that are Scrum certified and one Scrum Master, you say, okay, we have a good team. Unfortunately, it's the opposite. We have 10 Scrum Master and only one developer certified Scrum. Now, tell me, if we have 10 Scrum Master that are screaming in your team and only one that is working, isn't the meme of a booth with 10 people with the megaphone that are screaming to only one that is paddling versus the right booth with only one that is keeping the rhythm and 10 that are paddling? But the organization is so used of this dysfunction that it's not anymore a dysfunction.
That's right. And it kind of ladders back to the concept of having the right people in the right place in the organization, right? You don't need to have 10 scrum masters and one developer.
Yeah, indeed. And so let's do another example. Let's put a plumber. I guess you have a plumber in your portfolio, something that does industrial plumbing. Yeah?
So, yeah, we've got a sewer business. That's right. Sewer maintenance.
Good. That's your business. Let's say that we need to put no new people in the rooster, and so we need to hire people from the market. You don't find the right people, but you find something that is really close to the culture of the company, the social fit is there, is not that senior, but you get him in the company and you help him with the typical apprenticeship program where the guy from junior is followed by somebody that is more senior and then is growing through learning on the job by doing, follow with a peer that is helping him to grow. This, I believe, is a normal model into the kind of sewer or plumbing industry, isn't it?
Yes, the apprenticeship model is certainly a common one. Um, and to touch on kind of your example, I think you mentioned you find a person who may not have the right skills, but they have the right kind of culture fit, that sort of thing. A lot of folks I've spoken to, and I think sort of a growing or a very common philosophy is that it's much more important to hire for attributes in many cases, even at the leadership level, than it is, maybe I should say, especially at the leadership level, than it is to hire for, technical skills, right? Because to your point, technical skills can generally be learned and taught as long as the person has the right drive, the right coachability, the right empathy, the right attributes, right? So that's pretty key. And in many cases, I think that's a lot of what, you know, recruitment firms and kind of RPO type firms look for in candidates. That's what the screens often consist of.
I guess not all in Canada, even a lot in US and in Europe. And the bigger is the corporation, the the process is more oriented for pedigree and skills that are really niche instead of cultural fit. Because when you go to work for a corporation, it's the culture of the corporation that will forge your mindset. It's not the opposite. It's an intriguing social aspect where the culture of a social entity or a social organism is the sum of the culture of the people inside the social organ. So more the culture is shared from a certain number of people, the new people that will join the team, it will normalize to the culture of the team. they cannot change it. It's a typical corporate problem. But the concept of the apprenticeship is something that in IT doesn't exist, for instance. That is something crazy for me because I grew up since I was a kid going to the summer to work, especially in construction sites, because I need to get home money to sustain my university study. And so I was always working in an environment where the apprenticeship was the norm. Then I joined IT as an engineer, and I was expecting somebody senior than me that was paying me and helping me in my career growth. And I got nobody. And when we implement into the organization the new hiring pipelines that are looking for personality traits, social fit, and not for skills, hard skill, but for coachability, so the ability to grow, the grow mindset. And we implant the software craftsmanship dojo to help people with a community development that fosters apprenticeship. We see that the companies are able to farm in-house what the market is not able to provide them, or better. Maybe the market has it, but the price to purchase this kind of guy is like the price of an expendable. Because I was reading a few weeks ago that one high profile in US that was fogged between multiple companies as an IT AI expert got an onboarding package of $1 million yearly. It's insane, isn't it?
It's a very in demand skill set, that's for sure.
Yeah, but if you pay me 1 million to bring my brain in your company, am I a scientist or a mercenary?
It's a good point, especially depending on how the compensation is structured, right? If it's a one time, you know, limited strings attached, probably 12 to 24 month sort of thing, then yeah, it's a question. Are you truly invested in the long term outcomes of what you're building and what you're creating, or are you more invested in, getting an even bigger signing bonus at the next place you go?
Yeah, yeah. To me, it looks the insane word of I come to your house to get a slice of the cake, not to help you to prepare the party and improve the recipe, and doing it for the purpose of creating an amazing party. I want only the cake and then I leave. That this is what the market is improving as a dysfunction in this latest period, especially after AI came on the arena of the digital disruption. And going back to your point, all this could be stopped by leadership if leadership start to have an holistic approach. But if we are people from the market, providing them a lot of cash to bring in the company their skills and not their culture, what do we expect with the culture? So isn't a myopia of the leadership not stopping this kind of process to be established from HR or from, I don't know who has the authority in a company to do that. If it's a small company, probably is even the CEO. But isn't a fault of the leadership if the culture starts to fall apart?
Yeah, it's probably, I mean, we don't typically hire AI engineers that receive $1 million signing bonuses, but I imagine, for folks in those seats, um, it's a pretty tough balance, because if your competitor is willing to pay for, there's a reason that top quality talent is so in demand. It's not necessarily, there's not necessarily a ton of folks with those skill sets. There's seemingly more supply than, or seemingly more demand than there may be supply. And if your competitors are willing to pay something similar, you somewhat need to match that. Now, to your point, if it's due to, a poor hiring process or a poor talent search process, then, and it's sort of a lazy way to hire someone that looks good on paper, then yeah, that's probably not the best approach, right? You probably want to make sure that you're vetting folks, and you want to balance those kind of near term incentives and make sure that folks are bought in on the longer term incentives too, because you want ultimately to hire someone that is there to set the table with you, right, and not just take a slice of the cake. So you gotta have both sides, because everyone wants to eat the cake at a party, but not everyone's there to set the table also.
Yeah, but if at the end of the party everybody is drunk, nobody will clean it. So we need to keep a balance. And this is probably also another interesting aspect, because if there is something that I learned from the world of F1 and MotoGP, is that the relentless pursuit of improving, of continuous improvement in every aspect, from leadership to operation, is the real driver of what they do. And for them, failure is a lesson learned. So when we see a MotoGP rider that is winning, everybody cheers. Okay, good, bravo. But the real lesson learned are in every session they weren't able to stay in the top row. Every session there have pushed beyond the limits of the motorbike, and then and the bike and themselves into the gravel, hopefully without injuries. And these are the moments where all the engineers close together with the driver and they start to understand, okay, what happened? Post-mortem interview, and then they start to realize what improve on the motorbike. But behind this, there is a team that is observing all the data about how the team itself is working to improve their way of working. And the fact that in F1 you have pit stop of 2 seconds almost nowadays is insane. So 16 people around a car that in 2 seconds, 1, 2, boom, the car is gone. 4 wheels were changed and everybody returns in the pit. This kind of performance is not achievable with casual leadership. It's not achievable if you don't train on a constant pace. And in IT, leadership is not working for continuous improvement, is working for providing to the board vanity metrics of, hey buddy, we are doing something that is hypothetically moving the company into the direction of providing you sooner or later as a shareholder some return of investment. Is this something that in the kind of business you are doing is not possible to have? Or is still a possibility that in somehow way you have tried to put in a corner and keep it under control?
Yeah, it's a really good example. I mean, we our approach to monitoring and making sure that everyone's kind of in the right direction starts with kind of setting the right KPIs, right? What are the data points that we want to monitor? And you don't want to have too many, right? Because that can become burdensome, but you want to have ones that provide detail on what may be to come, so kind of leading indicators, as well as information that kind of provides more of a post-mortem view, like a lagging indicator, right? So we're always looking, of course, at financial metrics, but there's a lot more, and they're very bespoke depending on the business model. It could be total number of jobs, it could be average revenue per job if it's a trade contracting service, it could be inventory levels, and if it's a contract manufacturer, or inventory cycles, turns, right? So those sorts of things depend on the business model, but it's really important to establish the right ones, and then to tie back to our incentive discussion, to really tie responsibilities to KPIs that actually create value for an organization. So any KPI you have, you should be able to tie that back to return on invested capital ultimately.
Yes. And again, what you are saying here is something that really connects to some observation that we have around the silent war that there is in the boardroom, where the KPI were designed up front to provide you results that are pleasing you in the process of, okay, I know that this investment is going south. And it's something that is really, really annoying to me because the board seems to be a vacuum compared from the people that are working on the field. And this is an indicator, behavioral indicator that we observe a lot of time in organizations that are on the edge of collapsing. But a good point that you touched before, that I love how it unfolds so far, is that at the end, when you start to have the operational excellence, so trying to improve the efficiencies of your operation from design to delivery, getting data, these data are the core asset of your company, paired with the people that are working in your company. And so if the company wants to evolve, the evolution is data driven because the data are telling us the now, how we look today, and a trajectory with some KPI, even better connected with some OKRs, how we should behave and be in the future. But then the core assets are the people inside the company. And then you have clearly stated that through the apprentices model, they are growing. Is this the key of creating an organization that can scale? This ability to grow data driven, recognizing that the data of your company and the people working in your company are the two gold and silver pieces of your organization that are creating at the end the real value of your company? Or there is something more?
I think those are two really important pieces. You can't hold, no one can hold themselves, and you can't hold anyone else accountable if you're not, if you don't have the data to support. And it's hard to design the right incentive packages. It's hard to design, the right roles, even if you don't know what key value drivers you're focused on. Right. So I think those are really important aspects. And from having good information flows, having the right people kind of going after them is key.
So amazing. Yeah, I guess we have discussed about so many stuff, Sean, that I can continue for hours to discuss about you getting real example of companies and correlate them with dysfunctional IT. I strongly believe that what we have touched today is a good picture, an understandable one for leadership out there, especially leadership working in the dysfunctional IT field, about how they should tackle digital transformation and how the people and the data in their company should drive the evolution of what they do, and the people inside they should be in a well-being status that has to be monitored with empathy and with a gentle touch, not with an harsh one. I guess that the recipe is unfolded. I'm really thankful for the discussion, Sean. Do you have anything else that you want to add?
No, I'd say, for anyone that wants to get in touch, you can go to smbinvestornetwork.com or searchfundventures.co, and you can reach me at sean@searchfundventures.co. Always happy to chat more about leadership strategies, our portfolio, and how to co-invest with us.
Awesome. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of people will reach out and we will be happy to see your comment. Smash here below to tag your friends, to do whatever you want to share this episode, to connect with Sean. And Sean, thank you so much for your insights. I really love the conversation. Hope to see you soon.
Thanks so much, Michele.
Listener, goodbye and see you in the next episode.
Thanks for listening, and please remember to subscribe to the Forge of Unicorns to stay up to date with our latest episodes.